Good morning, everyone. It's good to be with you and to be joined by Ambassador Hillman, as Canadians will know, our Canadian ambassador in Washington, and Minister Ng. We thought that as Team Canada, we would give you an update as to what we've done in the last few months. The last time we did that update, I think, was maybe in Washington, or you've seen us engaging with our colleagues, and I let perhaps Minister Ng tell you about everything we've been doing since we started that work. But let me start, because folks watching at home would say a lot of things have happened in the United States in the last few months, and that's true. The good thing, though, is that the strategy that we had put forward is very, very relevant, probably more relevant today than ever. As you know, we have been working to make sure that in every corner of the United States, not only in the traditional place of New York, Washington, or LA, but places like Nebraska, places like Texas, that not only political leaders, but people will understand that we're just not the nice people from the north, but this is a very strategic relationship. And in our interactions with our American friends, the strategy we have adopted is always around three things. The first thing is around security. Making sure that everyone in the United States, and I remember even when I was in Nebraska, when I went to visit the Strategic Command, that everyone would understand that Canada is a very strategic partner when it comes to defense and security in the North and obviously in the Arctic. The second thing is around supply chain resiliency. And that is more relevant today, I think, than ever, because our supply chain are more integrated than I would think over the last few years, over the last 10 years, I would say certainly. Whether it's about semiconductors, whether it's about EVs, whether it's about battery, whether it's about natural resources. And I can tell you, our American friends understand that. We just had Jake Sullivan, for Canadians who may not know him, but he's the National Security Advisor of the United States. So someone who's very close to the president. And one of the things we had a chance to chat was really about these supply chains, which are very integrated on both sides of the border. And the last thing we bring in our discussion with our American friends is always about a growth agenda for North America. And I think the announcement we did yesterday about the EV tariff and steel and aluminum, and obviously on Chinese EVs, is going in that direction, because there's only one market here. So the good thing is that when we talk to our Republican friends, they say, we like you because you talk business. And when we talk to Democrats, they say, we like you because you align on policy. So our strategy is very relevant. I'll try to summarize that and leave my colleagues to say more. Mais seulement en français pour vous dire, écoutez, on est ici, c'est l'équipe Canada. On est venu vous donner, avec évidemment l'ambassadrice Hillman que tout le monde connaît, l'ambassadrice canadienne à Washington qui fait un travail exceptionnel. On est chanceux d'avoir l'ambassadrice avec nous. Évidemment, ma collègue Marianne que tout le monde connaît. On voulait vous donner un peu un survol de ce qui s'est passé dans les derniers mois, parce qu'évidemment, il y a beaucoup de choses qui se sont passées aux États-Unis récemment. Il y a beaucoup de choses qu'on a fait aux États-Unis. Mais il y a une chose qui demeure, c'est que la stratégie qu'on avait mise en place au début est encore plus importante aujourd'hui, je dirais, que jamais. Vous savez, un des objectifs qu'on avait, c'est d'amener à travers les différents États américains, les décideurs politiques, les décideurs économiques, cette vision-là stratégique. C'est-à-dire que les Canadiens, ce n'est pas juste le voisin au nord, mais c'est un pays stratégique avec lequel, je dirais, les Américains ont une relation indispensable. Et notre stratégie, ça a toujours été sur trois choses. D'abord, la partie sécurité. Quand j'étais au Nebraska récemment même, je visitais les militaires là-bas, et ils comprennent bien la nature intégrée de la défense nord-américaine avec le NORAD, évidemment le Nord et l'Arctique. La deuxième chose, c'est au niveau des chaînes d'approvisionnement stratégiques. Et ça, je peux vous dire que quand on a eu Jake Sullivan, pour ceux qui nous regardent, qui est le conseiller à la sécurité nationale du président des Américains, donc quelqu'un qui est très près à la Maison-Blanche, les enjeux de chaînes d'approvisionnement et le fait qu'elles sont plus intégrées maintenant que jamais, ça nous rapproche. Hein? Je pense qu'on parle, par exemple, des semi-conducteurs qui sont finalisés à Bromont. Quand on parle, évidemment, du titane, par exemple, qu'on fait chez nous. Quand on parle des véhicules électriques, quand on parle des minéraux critiques, la Maison-Blanche, nos collègues américains comprennent l'importance de la relation. Et finalement, je vous dirais, ce qu'on propose à nos voisins américains, c'est souvent un plan de croissance économique pour l'Amérique du Nord. Et l'annonce des tarifs hier, je peux vous dire, va vraiment dans cette direction-là, parce que clairement, nos voisins américains comprennent on a tout avantage de travailler ensemble dans un espace économique comme celui de l'Amérique du Nord pour favoriser nos travailleurs, favoriser nos entreprises, pour avoir un plan de croissance pour l'Amérique du Nord. Là-dessus, I'll leave my colleague Mary to say more to you.
Well, thank you very much, Minister Champagne. It's terrific to speak to all of you about the work we've been doing since we were given this task by the Prime Minister as Team Canada to engage our colleagues, our partners, and Americans. It's been a productive many months. I would say we've been crisscrossing, the three of us and others on the cabinet as well, but certainly the three of us across Canada and across the United States. We've been engaging at the national level. We've been engaging at local levels. In fact, indeed, at all levels. So from from local leaders like mayors all the way to to governors, to congresspeople, to senators, across across the United States, and I thought maybe the best way to to sort of illustrate an example, and this is one, and you can sort of almost replicate this through the engagement we've had across Canada and the U.S. The trip that Ambassador Hillman and I did in Texas, it was impactful, and it was impactful from this standpoint. It's really Team Canada because it isn't just us who work in government. It was who came with us on the trip were Canadian investors who were employing significant people in Texas. They were industries that have presence in Texas. We were having a conversation with the governor about not only what we do today and the contribution that these Canadians make to the Texan economy, but indeed what the opportunities are to keep doing this work. So whether it is continued collaboration, more collaboration around energy security, more collaboration around digital industries and AI, and what we could be doing more together. So very constructive dialogues and discussions with really a goal in mind, which is to illustrate and to talk about this partnership and this collaboration between the two countries truly as Team Canada, not just at the governmental level, but with civil society, with workers and unions, with business leaders and other opinion leaders on both sides of the border. And I would say that I think the most recent engagement and we continue to do it was PENWAR. I mean, Canada hosted PENWAR this year, which is the Pacific Northwest Summit that is that happens between Canada and the United States on the West Coast, and we're going to be hosting and FIFA games together. So there's quite a lot of energy and work and continued collaboration, and that's the kind of work that's been really terrific. So maybe Kirsten can give you all the run of the details because we're so lucky to have Kirsten as our ambassador to be doing this work with us together. Good.
Okay. Thanks very much. Bonjour tout le monde. So maybe just a few things to add on to give you a sense of the scope and the scale of the activities over that last number of months. And since we talked about this, I guess, in January in Montreal, when we really launched this concerted and fairly systematic effort to make sure that we were getting to regions of the United States, as Minister Champagne says, that are perhaps less traveled, but have really important relationships with Canada, economic relations, security relationships, military relationships, whatever the case may be. So we've been to Texas and Florida, North Carolina and South Carolina, and about 33 states in the recent months. Between the three of us, we have met about 42 governors. We have had a number of interactions with our businesses, with these local lawmakers, and we have sought, as I've said before, to make all of those meetings incredibly concrete. So why does the Canadian relationship, the relationship with Canada, whether it's an economic nexus, whether it's a security nexus, whether it's a law enforcement nexus, why does working with Canada matter to that community, that city, that state? What do we bring to the table? And just by way, by way of illustrating the success of this very busy and concerted effort, I was at the Republican National Convention a number of weeks ago, at the Democratic National Convention last week, and in both of those, for both of those conventions, I got invitations to join policy discussions that were being led by some of these regional lawmakers. So in Milwaukee, there was a roundtable on energy. There were certain state-level delegates getting together wanting to talk about trade and investment. We had just a variety of different interactions that were very substantive, that allowed us to take some of the messages that we were providing when we were on the ground in those states and talk about them again at these conventions where these policy matters are being developed. And that's important to Canada. We need to make sure that we are present and we are in the minds of American lawmakers from across the country and from both parties as that they are developing their policies. Alors, peut-être 2-3 mots en français, juste pour dire, on a eu énormément de réunions, de rencontres, plus que 500 différentes interactions depuis qu'on a lancé cette initiative. On a rencontré presque 40 gouverneurs. On est allé à plus que la moitié des États aux États-Unis. On bouge, on bouge, on bouge. C'est vraiment actif. Mais c'est plus qu'actif, c'est pas de bouger simplement pour bouger, c'est pour créer des relations avec les législateurs dans les régions, dans les villes, les différents États, pour qu'on puisse démontrer à eux à quel point la relation avec le Canada est importante pour eux, non pas en termes généraux, mais pour leur communauté, leur sécurité, leur puissance économique, les emplois dans la région. Et puis ça marche parce qu'on se fait inviter de plus en plus à ces discussions, et plus récemment, en tout cas pour moi, c'était à la Convention des Républicains à Milwaukee, la Convention des démocrates à Chicago la semaine dernière. Merci.
We'll take your questions.
Good afternoon, Mia Rabson from the Canadian Press. You mentioned that supply chains were one of the key things that was part of this, but there's been a number of disruptions from domestic issues in Canada to those supply chains in the last few years. You know, port strikes, the Freedom Convoy, the rail stoppage last week. What are you hearing from the Americans about the impact that all of these domestic disturbances are having on the relationship and their sort of confidence in Canada?
Well, I would say that it's about mutual reliance. I mean, they understand. Let me give you an example. So for Canadians watching at home, 80% of all the semiconductors that are manufactured in the United States are packaged and tested in Canada. Just think about that. When you're talking about the resilience, if you agree with me that semiconductor is the DNA of progress, and it's not just me saying that, it's the President Biden, when he came to the House of Commons, reminded Canadians and Americans how joined up we are. That's just one example. But I can give you the example of titanium now. Canada is replacing other nations, which are probably much less friendly to the United States when it comes to the production of titanium. This is in Sorel in Quebec, where Rio Tinto has invested close to $1 billion. I can go on with respect to biomanufacturing. Critical minerals is probably the most obvious one. I'll give you an example. When I was first in Washington, and Ambassador Hillman would remember that because that was quite a moment. We were together. I was meeting my counterpart, and I said, Madam Secretary, do you realize that there's only one refinery of cobalt in all of North America? She kind of looked at me. She looked at her team, said, is that true? And they said, yeah, it's true. And she said, I guess you're going to tell me where. I said, yeah, it's in Cobalt, Ontario, by the way. And it took about 10 years to permit. So the logical thing for us to do in North America is not trying to replicate, but is to be complementary. And you've seen recently the DOD investing also in that facility in Canada. So that's the kind of relationship, strategic partnership that we have been fostering, that we engage with the National Security Council, with other secretaries, obviously, of the cabinet in the United States. But one thing I can tell you is that our American friends understand we're moving from being nice to being strategic. That's always what I say to them. And when they realize, and as Mary said in the Ambassador, every time they realize that, I think we're making progress because we know it, but it's really relevant that folks in Nebraska, folks in Florida, folks in Texas, in Illinois, just Illinois is $1 trillion economy. Just imagine about that. If they were a country, they'd be part of the G20. Does it matter we meet the mayor and the governor? Yes. For sure. This is one of the largest economies in the world, so that's the kind of thing that we're bringing. And I would say governors, the ambassador would agree with me, and Mary, the governors, the mayors, the Chamber of Commerce, the unions, they understand that because they see it on a daily basis. We just need to bring that voice to all of the American people.
And Minister Ng, I think this is probably for you. China responded overnight to the tariffs yesterday, both saying that they will respond themselves, seems like threatening retaliation, but also insisting that they are not unfairly subsidizing their industry, that it's just innovation and good planning. What do you say to them?
Well, they are they are subsidizing. They have a deliberate policy for overcapacity, and the decision we made after talking to Canadian industries and after and you all know how Canada has been making investments and attracted significant investment in this sector that is not only going to fight climate change but really grow those jobs and those skills for years to come. So standing up for your workers and standing up for the industry was what yesterday's decision is about. But here's the thing I would also say. Canada is a country that is a open trade country, but a fair trade country. We have put a price on paying our workers fairly. This industry in the growing of electric vehicles are going to create jobs all around the country. In my own home province of Ontario, from Windsor to all the way through into Oakville and into Quebec. I mean, these are this is a vibrant industry that we are investing in to grow. We pay our workers and we have high environmental standards. Those are wired into the trade agreements that this government has negotiated time and time again. And fair trade means level the playing field for fair trade rules. Fair trade rules means fair trade for workers and environmental protection.
Ashley Burke, CBC News. Ambassador Hillman, is a potential Harris administration lesser known to Canada than a Trump administration in terms of what it could do when it comes to issues like trade? And do you have any concerns about a potential Harris administration and what it could mean for Canada's interests?
Thanks very much. Well, I think that we are well informed about what we expect both candidates to bring in the areas that matter to us and our relationship. I think that candidate Harris, Vice President Harris, is unrolling the specifics of her platform, through the speeches that she is doing at the convention, but also all of the other speeches that she's doing around the country right now. And so we're gaining insight to that, but we also know a lot of the people that are working with her as policy advisors. So we're getting insight from them as to the directions that she is planning to go in. It's fairly transparent. I don't think that's that complicated. It's a lot of the similar positions that the Biden administration has had with her, but she'll put her own stamp on it, and I think that that's just something that we're watching carefully. I would like to say that we had a really robust discussion here yesterday with ministers. We had C.J. Mahoney here, who is the former Deputy Secretary of Trade under President Trump. And Steve Rahul is Canada's former chief trade negotiator, and we had a discussion with the ministers specifically around the question you asked, which is, let's talk about what we know about what a Harris administration would do on trade and economic policy. Let's talk about what we know a Trump administration would do on trade and economic policy. Where are they different? Where are they similar? Because there are things that are similar between their two positionings. But also, what is Congress saying? Because as folks may know, in the United States, Congress has the lawmaking power, which is separate from the administration, and there are nuanced and different views within both parties through congressional representatives. And those are the representatives that have the legislative authority to do a lot of the trade actions that both candidates are talking about. So it's important to understand where those guys are coming from as well. So we talked about all that. We talked about what it means for Canada and how to prepare. But to answer your question about concern, I don't think we have any reason to be concerned to be frank, either administration. I think that candidate Trump has some thoughts on global tariffs, which could be complicated for Canada, but I also think that the application of those to Canada will be very difficult for the United States. And so when we get into that discussion, if it ever comes about, if he is elected and we're in that discussion, I'm confident that we're going to make our way through that in a way that works for Canada.
And Minister Champagne, have you been reflecting at all on what it could mean for your party if the by-election in Montreal next month doesn't go the way you want it to?
Listen, we're putting all the efforts to make sure that we win that election. We have a candidate which has been an elected member at the municipal level for over 20 years. She brings a background. I spent 3 days with her on the ground. People want to engage. People want to know her. I'd say, listen, for us, we're going to do the work that we need to do. Because you know what? At the end of the day, Canadians understand, the question on the ballot and in the future ballot, in which society do you want to live in? And what is the vote you're going to cast not only is going to do for you, but for the country. And I think when I'm in the street, and trust me, I'm pretty good at door knocking. I do that pretty fast. I would say people want people who fight for them. They want people who deliver for them. And they want to see people who take action for them. The type of announcement we did yesterday on the EV tariff on steel and aluminum is exactly, I would say, what Canadian workers, Canadian people in Canadian industry want to see from a government. And that's kind of the approach we're taking on every issue. Delivery, delivery, delivery. Sir?
Good afternoon, Ministers and Ambassador. I have a question for you, Ambassador Hillman. You might have noticed that in recent months, some Republicans in Congress have been quite critical of Canada. I'm thinking of military spending, Mike Johnson saying that we're riding U.S. coattails on that issue, but also on the border. Senator Cruz and Rubio releasing a letter recently saying they want the northern border to be strengthened, to crack down on that border, fearing that there could be terrorists coming into this country. I know that's kind of an old trope, but they're reviving it. What do you make of this anti-Canada slant that's coming from some Republicans, and how are you prepared to deal with it?
So I guess the first thing I would say is I don't believe that there is any kind of anti-Canadian sentiment within the Republican Party. I have spent months and months visiting Republicans across the country, many of whom are the closest allies of former President Trump, and there isn't a single meeting where I wasn't received with open arms and enthusiasm towards what Canada and the United States can do together. So I think it's very important for Canadians to understand that we are appreciated and we are well liked, if that's the right word, but seen as strategic partners throughout the United States of America. The kind of rhetoric that sometimes gets amplified in the context of the lead up to an election has to be distinguished between really what's happening on the ground. And it's my job, someone like me, to emphasize on really what's happening on the ground and the real relationships that we have. On the defense question, when the Prime Minister was in Washington recently at NATO and announced our path to 2%, that was very well received across the board. In addition, and I think this is also very important to recognize, Americans of all stripes are also very pleased with the focus that we are putting on where we're going to spend the money. Because Canada is focusing on our natural advantages and sort of what we can do and bring to the partnership and bring to our relationship with the United States that is unique. And it has to do with our geography, and it has to do with our focus on the Arctic. So that is being well received by even those who are, let's say, the most demanding when it comes to defense spending.
Hi there, Mackenzie Gray with Global News. Questions for Minister Ng. Just following up on what Mia said before, specifically on retaliation from China, what would you say to farmers in particular who could be worried canola, pork, other exports could be tariffed by the Chinese because of the EV situation?
Well, it's precisely why we did the consultation that we did leading up to the decision that we made to impose the tariffs. It's really important that we talk to Canadian industries, but let's remember what this is about. It is about protecting a Canadian industry and Canadian workers, and it is about fairness in trade. And as the trade minister and as Canada, that is a country that that always stands up for rules-based trade, our decision to do this work while protecting these workers and the industries also is about ensuring that there is, that there is a level playing field, and that Canada will stand up to ensure that we do what is necessary to protect our industries and our workers, but also to continue to stand up for a fair trading system in this global in the global system.
M. Champagne, on peut vous entendre en français sur les menaces de représailles de la Chine par rapport à ces tarifs-là. Est-ce que vous craignez pour certaines industries canadiennes?
Écoutez, hier, comme ma collègue le disait, le Canada, c'est un pays qui croit au commerce international, mais basé sur des règles. Quand les gens respectent les règles, ça va bien, mais quand il y a des gens qui prennent des mesures, par exemple, pour faire du dumping dans nos marchés, c'est-à-dire de la surproduction. On l'a vu au niveau de l'acier, on le voit au niveau de l'aluminium. Écoutez, notre rôle, le bon rôle à moi, c'est de défendre les travailleurs et les travailleuses de chez nous, de l'aluminium, de l'acier, de l'industrie qu'on est en train de bâtir. Ce qu'on dit, c'est que faut comprendre, là, les gens qui nous écoutent comprennent ça, c'est que de l'autre côté, on a un pays, la Chine, qui subventionne, prend des mesures, qui vont contre les règles du commerce international pour amener des véhicules comme ça chez nous. Alors, vous comprenez que chez nous, on dit, bien, écoutez, un instant, nous, on est pour des règles claires, mais en autant que tout le monde respecte les règles. S'il y a des gens qui ne respectent pas des règles, bien, alors là, il faut réagir. Alors, la position qu'on a prise, elle n'est pas différente de ce que nos voisins ont pris aux États-Unis, mais je vous rappellerai que nos voisins en Europe ont fait la même chose. Les Européens ont dit, un instant, si vous utilisez des mesures commerciales qui vont contre les règles du commerce, si on ne joue pas sur les mêmes règles, bien, à ce moment-là, on va mettre des tarifs. Vous l'avez vu en Europe, vous l'avez vu aux États-Unis, puis vous l'avez vu ici au Canada. Puis c'est sûr qu'on va toujours se tenir debout pour défendre nos travailleurs, défendre notre industrie, puis défendre l'intérêt des Canadiens. On a déjà joué dans ce film-là. Alors, c'est sûr qu'on était là hier. Je pense que c'est une bonne nouvelle pour les travailleurs, bonne nouvelle pour l'industrie, puis bonne nouvelle pour l'ensemble du pays.
J'aimerais vous entendre, M. Champagne, mais également Mme Hillman, sur cette question, à savoir, vous en avez parlé un peu en anglais, mais c'est quoi quelles seront les différences, dépendamment du prochain locataire de la Maison-Blanche? Avez-vous deux stratégies parallèles, je dirais deux fichiers Excel presque, pour négocier avec l'administration Trump versus l'administration Harris?
Écoutez, l'avantage, je vais laisser la parole à ma collègue, l'ambassadrice Hillman, l'avantage pour les gens qui nous écoutent, c'est d'avoir une équipe qui a l'expertise et l'expérience. Parce qu'il faut savoir qu'on fait du commerce avec les Américains depuis au moins 150 ans. Mais l'avantage de l'équipe en place aujourd'hui, que ce soit l'ambassadrice Hillman, que ce soit ma collègue Mary Ng, moi-même, la ministre Freeland, la ministre Joly, on était là durant des administrations républicaines et démocrates. Donc, la grande différence qui devrait donner confiance aux gens, c'est de dire, vous avez une équipe en place qui a l'expérience et l'expertise. On sait faire avec l'un comme on sait faire avec l'autre. Et c'est pour ça que je vous dis que le plan qu'on a mis de l'avant, notre stratégie, c'était la sécurité, les chaînes d'approvisionnement, un plan pour la croissance en Amérique du Nord. Puis je peux vous dire, quand je parle aux républicains, ils me disent, on aime donc ça vous entendre parce que vous parlez business, vous parlez d'affaires, vous parlez comme nous autres. Quand on parle aux démocrates, ils nous disent, mon Dieu, que vous êtes alignés sur nos politiques. Alors, c'est un message qui porte des deux côtés, et c'est exactement ça qu'on amène à Washington, mais qu'on amène au Nebraska. Vous vous rappelez, je suis allé au Nebraska, 4 milliards d'échanges commerciaux avec le Nebraska. Même chose quand on parlait à l'Illinois. Alors, notre plan à nous, c'est de dire, on est prêt, on a travaillé avec les deux administrations, on sait faire, puis on va défendre les intérêts, évidemment, des travailleurs, des Canadiens et de l'ensemble de l'industrie canadienne. Mais, Madame l'ambassadrice, je suis sûr que vous avez plus à dire encore.
Alors, oui, tout ça. Mais je dirais aussi, les Américains et les gens qui les représentent au niveau politique s'intéressent à certaines choses très claires et très communes. La croissance économique, les emplois, sécurité nationale, sécurité chez eux, ce dont ils ont besoin pour une sécurité énergétique, d'avoir de l'eau pure, de l'air fraîche. Républicains, démocrates, ils s'intéressent tous les deux à ces mêmes choses. Alors pour nous, c'est vrai qu'il y a des différences de point de vue sur comment les deux partis veulent atteindre ces objectifs. Mais les objectifs sont au fond les mêmes. Et pour nous, ce qui est important, c'est que nous apportons à nos interlocuteurs américains notre message sur comment on puisse leur aider à atteindre ces objectifs. Et là, le valeur que la relation avec le Canada a dans ces domaines-là, ça ne change pas. Ça, c'est notre valeur à nous. Alors, c'est ça qu'on apporte. Peut-être on le présente d'une différente façon. Peut-être on doit leur parler un peu différemment, dépendant justement des moyens qu'ils vont essayer de mettre en place pour achever ces objectifs. Mais finalement, ce que nous apportons, c'est ce que nous apportons et c'est bien apprécié à Texas, à New York, à Massachusetts, partout.
Last question.
Good afternoon, Ministers and Ambassador. Marika Walsh with the Globe and Mail. Thanks for taking our questions. If you could answer this in English and French, that would help my colleagues. We're hearing from experts that Canada needs to do more to essentially help the White House as it asks for things on trade. So those issues that you just mentioned on energy security, on defense, on trade. What else can Canada tangibly offer the U.S. since we weren't able to do things like help on Haiti with that defense force a few months ago? What else specifically can Canada offer to take something off their plate while you're asking for deals on softwood lumber and other issues?
Do you want to go or do you want to take it?
I would have something to add, but you go first.
What I would say is, you know, at the very heart of these engagements, that's what this work has been. You know, that's what this work has been about. When we are able to, you know, to listen to and work with those that are important to the Canadian economic relationship, for example, that are also important to the American economic relationship. It advances this strategic partnership that Minister Champagne has talked about. You know, you know, if I think about my engagement, you know, with the United States Trade Representative and all of those that we have spent time with over the course of these last number of months in this very, very sort of disciplined way, it is, you know, you know, we're finding solutions along the way, right? I mean, and you know, you heard just you know, very recently we've been working for quite some time on, you know, on what the Columbia River Treaty was going to be, and that was a very, very important issue to the White House. And what we did and what this process allowed us to do was, while we were doing this engagement work, it actually was helping to solve issues that are important, you know, important to, you know, our you know, the present American White House. That's a very tangible example of what we did through this process that actually, as you said, took an item off the table. Why? Because we problem solved that very issue.
I'd give you, I think the ambassador said it best in a way. Today, economic security is national security. So when you go to Washington, you say, where can we help? Hey, I'll give you 3 examples very, very simply. The Americans passed the CHIPS Act. Now, when they realize that the 80% of it they do, but 20%, the last 20% is done in Canada, it's all good for our American friends to increase production, but they say, and it's in our best interest to say, hey, you know what? We're your strategic partner. We'll invest in that facility so that not only we can manufacture them, but we'll do the packaging and testing, so together we are more resilient. Because what I said to our colleagues at the White House, I'd say, I assume that behind the CHIPS Act is resiliency to remove your dependency from Asia. So here we come. We're a strategic partner. We say, you invest there, we'll invest on our side, and together we'll be more resilient. I'll give you the example of critical minerals. We look at that all the time because you've seen the generational investments on both sides of the borders to build EV cars and having the full supply chain. But you've seen that players have gone on both sides of the border, but they serve one market. It's only one North American market. So when we talk to our colleagues down south, they say, you do this, we'll do that. And together, we're going to be more resilient, and that's a plan for growth for North America, as we were saying with the ambassador. And I'll give you another very tangible example. When it came to titanium, titanium was an issue that, you know, we need to make sure that as we build more things, because we've been looking at onshoring and friendshoring, we said titanium before was done, most of it in Russia. Now, thanks to the investment we made with our private partners, Sorel in Quebec is one of the largest sites to produce titanium. Now, what do you do with titanium? You produce powder. With powder, you do 3D printing of parts. And with that, you can support the U.S. military with that. So this is the kind of things that with the ambassador, every time we go to Washington or to Nebraska or to Texas, is to look at these things and say, by the way, we are strategic because we're going to do this, that supports you, and that helps jobs on both sides of the border. So I would say this is very much a mindset of strategic relationship. And in a world where you see that the big things you're seeing is that decarbonization, digitization of the economy, and a geopolitics which have been changing, obviously our friends from the South understand that they have no better friends than Canadian. And when it comes to biomanufacturing, when it comes to titanium, when it comes to cobalt, when it comes to lithium, when it comes to EV, they said we better get that, making sure that we foster investments in North America, but also that we ensure the resiliency so that protect our industry and create jobs in North America.
Thanks, everyone.
Ambassador, can I just ask you, Donald Trump has recently speculated about a conservative government.
Alors, merci pour votre question. Moi, je pense que ce que nos amis américains comprennent maintenant, c'est que la sécurité économique et la sécurité nationale font un tout. Et certainement, nous, ce qu'on fait on amène toujours chez nos voisins américains cet aspect-là stratégique de relation. C'est-à-dire que c'est pas juste une relation amicale, mais c'est une relation stratégique. Je vais vous donner un exemple. Par exemple, on a vu aux États-Unis qu'ils ont adopté, par exemple, le CHIPS Act, qui était, dans le fond, pour augmenter la production de semi-conducteurs. Mais comme on a dit plus tôt, 80% des semi-conducteurs fabriqués aux États-Unis, l'assemblage final est fait chez nous à Bromont, au Québec. Alors ça, c'est un exemple concret. On a dit, bien écoutez, on va travailler ensemble, on va investir des deux côtés de la frontière, comme ça on aura des chaînes plus résilientes. La même chose du côté du titane. Si vous pensez à Sorel maintenant, qui est un des plus grands sites de production de titane au monde, bien là, on augmente la résilience. Avec le titane, on fait de la poudre. Avec la poudre de titane, on fait de l'impression 3D. Et ça peut servir, par exemple, pour l'industrie de la défense aux États-Unis. On fait la même chose avec le lithium, on fait la même chose avec le cobalt. Alors, l'idée derrière ça, c'est qu'à chaque fois qu'on aille au Nebraska, qu'on aille en Illinois, qu'on aille à Washington, qu'on aille en Floride, au Texas, on arrive toujours avec un aspect stratégique en disant, écoutez, vous allez faire cette partie-là, on va faire ça, mais on est conscient que les chaînes d'approvisionnement en Amérique du Nord sont unifiées, elles sont intégrées plus que jamais, et en même temps, bien, on parle de croissance économique parce que ça crée des emplois des deux côtés de la frontière. Donc, je vous dirais que notre approche sur la sécurité, les chaînes d'approvisionnement et un plan de croissance pour l'Amérique du Nord, ça fait énormément de sens, et je peux vous dire, c'est bien reçu autant du côté républicain que du côté démocrate. Merci.